The only thing I remember from the day I turned 30 back in 2016 is thinking how I wasted my late 20s being all the time on my phone. Little did I know that that would be nothing in comparison to how addicted I'd become to my phone during the pandemic. Just constantly being online became normalized to a degree that I've never experienced before. In the past 3 years, I tried limiting the number of hours I could use the phone, not using the phone in the evening, limiting the apps I use. And even though I came to a point where I spend very little time on social media, definitely under 30 minutes per day, I still can easily rack up 5 hours on my phone alone. And nothing I tried seemed to be making a difference. And then I turned my iPhone off and left it at home. So the thing is, I often work from different coffee shops, and in many of them here in Europe, there's no Wi-Fi, so I rely on my mobile data to be able to connect. And as I swapped my iPhone for my Nokia, I had no choice but to work with no internet for hours every day. Just to help you visualize what this might look like, imagine a work moment where you have nothing else but your brain and a sheet of paper in front of you to do the work. Maybe not even your notes, because Notion, Google Drive, nothing is available. You cannot Google what you're working on, you cannot ChatGPT it, you cannot procrastinate by choosing to answer email or messages on Slack. And I have to tell you, this experience has been revelational. First of all, I realized that my work has been punctuated by self-interruptions, and 99% of those were happening online. Any negative emotion, boredom, tiredness, lack of ideas, feeling overwhelmed, it all prompted me to escape into the web. And it does not matter whether it was actually my phone or my computer. Like, I was having a hard time with an Excel sheet. Let's check Slack for a sec. Struggling with writing a training material. Perhaps I can see what's up in my inbox. And I only realized the degree to which I was inclined to self-interrupt myself when the possibility to do so was taken away from me. This inability to scratch the itch immediately made each instance visible to me. But why is that a problem? Well, we know from research that after an interruption, we need to reload our mental whiteboard regarding what we're working on. And unlike a computer, the same brain area cannot run two processes in parallel. We cannot simultaneously listen to the radio and listen to a conversation. So let's do some ultra-conservative math to estimate how long these interruptions take. Let's say we interrupt ourselves every 15 minutes, though I have to say research says it's more like every 3 minutes, but we're being extra generous with this calculation. And let's say our interruption lasts for 3 minutes. We check social media quickly, maybe an email, reply to it. And let's say we'll lose another 5 minutes after the interruption, resetting our mental workspace, getting back into the zone. These are much more optimistic numbers than the current research, but why not? Let's run those. So at this rate, it means that during an 8-hour workday, we have 4 interruptions per hour, 8 hours in a workday, 3-minute interruption at a time, plus 5 minutes to refocus needed every 4 times per hour times 8 hours a day. So do the math, it basically equals 4 hours per day or 21 hours per week of interrupted time. A work week is 80 hours and half of our time is interrupted time. How much would you pay if someone offered you an extra 21 hours per week? And what would you do with this time? And how would it make you feel? That's exactly the first impression I had during my first week without the phone or internet. Did I just get more life, more time, more freedom? It really felt like I quit an invisible job and I suddenly was just much freer. And it really made sense once I did this calculation. The second insight I had was around this concept of disembodiment. I studied cognitive science and we talked a lot about how human cognition is embodied, meaning we get a lot of information about our world by just being in it with our bodies. So my question is, how does our mental state change when we're mentally constantly inside a virtual environment? In a way, you could argue that books also take you into an alternative world, but I think books are never as immersive as internet, because at most, our choice is between like the books world and the real world. But with the internet, the real world does not stand a chance. How can my ordinary reality compete with the exciting, limitless, full of unexpected things world in my palm, in my phone? Just observe people next time on your commute. They check their phone, look out of the window for like barely 30 seconds and take out the phone again. And look at what they're doing. They're just opening the same apps over and over again. So it feels like every single waking moment, it's a choice between here, the present, the reality, and virtual. And judging, at least by my morning commute, virtual is slowly winning in everyone's head. So for me, one of the totally unexpected things that happened is that I noticed after about a week without the internet that for the first time in as long as I can remember, I craved to look at art, at paintings. I stopped in front of galleries, as I walked down the street. And then that never happened to me before. I just assumed I'm not interested in that kind of stuff. And I'm no longer sure that I'm really not interested. I think it was just previously unable to compete with the things I had in my phone. Thirdly, as I said, even though I barely spend time on commonly accepted online time wasters like social media, I will find a million ways to avoid difficult work with pseudo productive endeavors on email, Slack, Googling, researching, ChatGPTing. But when I sit down in a coffee shop, disconnected from the internet, there are really not that many things that I could jump to as soon as I feel stuck, bored, or frustrated. And instead, I just gaze into nothing for a few moments and really think about nothing too in those moments. And then I glance back to my computer, to my work, and somehow ideas arise. So it's really harder for me to give in into that feeling of being stuck at a task and abandon it. I'm out, I sit down, I ordered the coffee. The idea of getting up and going to a different cafe in search of the internet so that I can Google, that all feels like stupid and like a huge errand. So I just sit there, internetless, staring at a blank page, and eventually my whiteboard reloads and I get into the zone and I work at things that I would normally procrastinate on for days. I really don't procrastinate anymore. I also noticed an emotional change. There's emotional residue that each of our interruptions leaves, right? You read an demanding email from your boss or a client, like a new task in your inbox, and you feel tense. You check CNN and you feel fear and anxiety. You go on Reddit or Twitter, you come out angry and frustrated. And as we go about our workday, we keep bumping into different emotion-laden situations, and these emotions continue to linger in the background for a while. And just think about it, for the first time in history of humanity, we're nonstop picking up a whole range of emotions, and I think it's safe to say they're mostly negative for most of us. And we are constantly processing all that baggage in the background as we work. Shouldn't this be super exhausting to us in and of itself? So I observed that as I was disconnected from the world for the most part of my workday, disconnected from news, from communication with, clients, partners, colleagues, I was able to spend more time than ever before in a very calm, contemplative, I would describe it, state of working. And I found this background emotional mental stability to be a totally unexpected side effect and just a generally very forgotten mental state for me. While for the most part I was not inconvenienced in any major way, there are a few things that I do miss. For instance, I miss taking pictures. I got a memory card for this one, so I can take more than 9 pictures, but they're still very bad quality. I do carry an external camera, but it's bulky. I don't always have it with me. Then some authentication codes, from two-factor verification, they don't send messages anymore. They require you to generate them in the app. When I do need a code, I usually pick up my smartphone, turn it on just for a minute in the evening, do whatever I need to do, and shut it down. The only thing I noticed, as soon as it's in my hands, my fingers are opening different apps, for the most part mail, and I only realize what happened after I see the mail screen loading on my iPhone, and I immediately turn it off. But it's so interesting how automatic these reactions are. I also somewhat miss Google Maps for orienting myself in the city. I don't really need them, but I realized how little I know the city. I definitely will need it for driving, though. This is a non-negotiable, so I'm not selling my phone if you're wondering. And sometimes I also miss to be able to send pictures to my family whenever I want. There are also a few things that I'm afraid of happening later on if I keep using my Nokia for like the long term. I'm also afraid ending up lonely and an outsider in terms of how I view the world. I already feel a little bit odd on the bus looking at all the people whose bodies are on the bus but souls are somewhere totally elsewhere. It does feel very lonely. I do not know anyone in person who is smartphone-less. I don't know anyone who I would feel would be comfortable with a voice call, like if I needed to call them to set up a meeting. I know everyone prefers messages. And 10 days ago, I wouldn't be comfortable if someone called me either. Actually, I still think I'm not that comfortable with that. But now I have no choice but to call people. I mean, I could text, but that takes so much time to text people on this one. Maybe I'll get used to it. Now, all of this is not to say that this is the only way in which I expect myself to work going forward. Not at all. In fact, a lot of my work must be done online. My point is that after the pandemic, when so many more things became online, when the lines between work and rest were often blurred, distracted work, in my case, completely crowded out non-distracted work. And now I actually enjoy connecting to the internet for 2-3 hours and getting all of my online work done in my typical frenzy when full screen windows are flying under my fingers with the speed of light, and I simultaneously have Slack, review the contract from a client, check my emails. And as a cognitive scientist, I do not recommend any of that, but as a human, a bit of multitasking, if it doesn't come at the expense of other work, is quite fun. But also the thing is, I know that no one is going to be writing their next novel or doing their next scientific discovery working like that. So there should be space for deep work. And email, Slack, ChatGPT, they might qualify as work. Your employer is definitely not going to be scolding you, catching you on any of those at 11 a.m. But it doesn't mean that they are benign. It's been only 10 days, but even that was enough for me to clearly see why deleting my social media never worked for me. I was addressing the wrong problem, because for me, it's not about using the right apps. For me, it's about interruptions. It's about being in a virtual world more than being in real life. And it's about choosing low pseudo productivity tasks in response to any discomfort and dealing with complex tasks. Still, at times I question myself and think maybe I'm crazy and I'm just like one of those people when electricity was invented and I would be saying I'm sticking with a candle. Maybe none of this is making sense. Or maybe if I stick to it for 3-6 months, I would completely reset my relationship with the phone and I would be able to have it with me all the time without it taking over my life. But I have to tell you, I'm skeptical. It's so easy for me to sell myself productive way of using the phone, and before I know it, I feel like I'm a prisoner of it again. I genuinely have no idea how much my Nokia stage will last, but subscribe if you want to follow along. And if you want to hear my thoughts on how ChatGPT in particular used to be a huge distractor for me, then watch this video here. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!